Hello.
Hi.
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 Oh, hi.
How are you?
Exciting to see you.
So nice to meet you. Where are you? You're so beautiful behind you. It looks like
I'm,
paradise.
I'm in my living room.
That's your living room? What's your plant watering routine?
I'm actually very casual about plants, and
Well,
my mom, who I've learned everything from,
yeah.
mommy. Oh, I only have 20 minutes, but so she's a very neat and tidy gardener, and she's 87 this month, and she does everything herself. I,
Yeah.
on the other hand, just let everything grow as they choose to. Mommy, the gentleman who did all the flowers in New York on the streets, he's here.
Well, you're doing something right. It looks amazing.
I just want to say
This
hi
is
when it hit
Irene.
because we were on the phone.
Oh, hey, Irene. Mommy's
Hi,
happy.
Hi.
Okay, bye.
Hi from New York.
Thanks, Irene. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know we only have 20 minutes. And,
Oh no, I've got more time than that. So take your time. Let's do this right.
Just by way, I was saying to Irene that just by way of introduction, so I've known of you. I used to be in another life floral designer. By no means at the scale at which you do things. But again, everything I learned was from my mom.
Yeah.
And I started in late 93 into early 94. And I then morphed into landscape design. I'd done an interior design course in DC when I was done with college, as you would call it. Yeah. And and so after that, it was easy to apply interior design learnings to landscape design.
Right.
And it wasn't something that was as popular in Nigeria at the time, to the extent that, yes, you did landscaping, but you didn't have drawings that supported it. So if you wanted to do a water feature and you wanted to show how the pipes were moving or your lighting for the garden, those sorts of things, you couldn't look at a diagram and see that. And so that was what differentiated me. That's what I brought, and it was an exciting time. But in 2005, I moved with the children to another city, my husband and I, and so it became very difficult to sustain the business. It was a 1-hour flight between the two cities, and it was just really difficult. So sadly, in 2007, I closed it down. Yeah. But I couldn't shake the love of working with flowers. And so in 2013, I started Nigeria's first garden and flower show. So this is actually the brochure, and I'm going to send one to you.
Oh, please do.
Brochure for the very first show that we had. Right. And I also have a coffee table book that I did called Imagine a Garden. And that takes you through about 15 Nigerian gardens. Wow. So I've done that. It still didn't fill the void for me. So I started the show. Right. And so next weekend would be our 9th outing in terms of, I've done 6 on my own and 2 collaborations. And then this 9th one is the first time it's going virtual. But when COVID was really overwhelming for us, when we were in the lockdown, I noticed that every single webinar had to do with gloom and doom around COVID. And so I then decided to start virtual garden tours of private gardens. Right. And I have done, so every Sunday evening, I would just open up a Zoom call and I would persuade someone to let us come to their gardens. And as long as they had someone to hold the phone and follow them around the gardens, we would just visit like that. And it grew to the point where I was getting about 100 people on every call. And last Sunday, I had the 20th garden tour. Okay. And the idea was an hour and a half of almost escapism, getting away from what was really happening, from the huge loss of lives, the way that that life as we knew it had altered, from the inability to meet up with one another, from the loss of income. We also went through a devaluation of our currency during COVID, just because of COVID. And it was, you know, so I used that as a way to just sort of an hour and a half where people could forget and just see beauty. And we had quite a few demonstrations in those, you know, people who just did floral arrangements in their home with pick anthuriums, whatever they grew in their gardens, and they, you know, there'd be a little demonstration. We learned about egg planting herbs and making teas. There was just all sorts of things that we did. So an hour and a half, we'd do 30 minutes of anything we wanted and an hour of actually touring a garden. And the next thing I knew, we were going outside of Nigeria. We went to Bermuda, we went to Ghana, we went to other cities outside of the city I live in, because people were now becoming more responsive and saying, yes, I want to share my garden, I want to share what I know.
Yeah.
And then at the point where, so I knew of you, knew of your work, and then I cannot tell what I was looking for when I just went to the site and I saw flash flowers, and I thought, that's interesting. What could that be? And I cannot tell you how connected I was emotionally to what you had done. And for almost every picture that I saw, there was an interpretation of hope. So I lost a really close first cousin to COVID as well. And it's just to see, and I don't know what you were thinking in terms of the spaces that you chose. But when you think about a phone booth, we don't use phone booths anymore.
Right.
But then what it said to me was, we moved from one way of communicating, from dialing the phone booth to having a phone in the palm of our hand. Now we've gotten to the point where we've moved even further than that, because even though we could use these devices, there was still the hope of the human connection. And now that was gone. But out of
and
that,
next to the phone booth was a post office box. We used to write letters. Then we used to talk on the phone. Yeah, so it's just like kind of like two things of a bygone era that would connect us, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was so poignant to me, because it said we can still stay connected in spite of what we're going through. You know, and when I saw the garland over the bus at the bus stop with that one woman in a city that is usually bustling, it seemed to me as if the flowers were saying, we're here, we're keeping the faith, and we're keeping you company. You're not alone. You know, so for every picture, the hot dog stand, imagine a typical afternoon. It almost said to me, the city will rise again.
Let's hope.
It will be beautiful again. And I could not, I mean, I've looked at I've left the page open for weeks on my laptop. I haven't shut the tab, and I go back to it and I look at it again and again, and I am thoroughly humbled by the level of generosity. I know what flowers cost. And so to gift that, the level of generosity, and I said to Rini, I want to meet this person. I want to be able to find out the how and the why, and to be able to tell people who are going through less than what New York was one of the hardest hit cities. And yet in that time, such an outpouring of generosity. And so I would like to be able to share that with people who are going through less and are completely flawed under. And I do not presume that you were not deeply affected by what was going on. There's no way you wouldn't have known someone. And yet, in the midst of that, being that generous. And the other thing is, we went through something in Nigeria where the army opened fire on peaceful protesters who were children, my children's age. So in the 20s, and this was just on the 20th of October. And immediately after that, I didn't stop the tours. I didn't want to stop the gardening tours because I knew it would help. But the next one I did, we talked about horticultural therapy and what plants can actually do when you are going through trauma. And so just talking about that, I realized again what those the essential workers who had to go out in the streets of New York, in those lonely streets with everything falling apart, just what those flowers would have done for them. And so I was inspired because at first I said, no, I can't do a tour this weekend. I'm too broke to do it. But then I thought, no, if I would follow that example that you have set, and we will talk about it candidly.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about what we were going through as a community. And we would, just remember that there is something that plants can give us. And it behoves us to accept what they give us and hopefully let them help us heal.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're speaking my language because I've been around plants plants and flowers since the day I was born. It's just such a part of my life. And, obviously it's very easy when you're around them to kind of occasionally forget how special they are. And, I was even quickly reminded once we went into lockdown in March, and March is terrible in New York. Like, it's the ugliest month ever. It's just gray and cold, and there's no sign of life. And it's not, it's technically it's spring, but it's not really. And, having just immediately then being locked in the house and away from work, within like 3 days, how much I missed them, and it's a reminder because like I work with them all the time, and I know I know the effect that they have, but it felt good even for me to be reminded, because I had some flowers sent to me via FedEx, and I was like the day before I knew they were going to come, I felt like the next day felt like Christmas, and I was going to open up boxes of flowers. So ask me anything.
Okay, so you just said something. You just said the effect that flowers have. Tell me about that. What's the effect that flowers can have on people?
I can only speak to the effect that they have on me and what I know that I need. Just speaking extremely candidly, I'm a person, I'm a visual person, but I need that little burst in the morning, almost like coffee. Whether it's listening to some beautiful music, or whether it's looking at, like a painting or a garden or a picture, I need that little jolt of something that's gonna like get me up off of the sofa and make me want to be like, okay, I want to go create. I want to do this. This is what I love to do. And it sounds trite and it sounds simple, but that's what I know that I need. And I know that flowers do that because they're temporary. They're a little bit of a luxury, especially in the winter, or especially good flowers, they're expensive. Flowers have, throughout the beginning of time, like flowers have marked celebrations, or they've been painted, or they've been carved into wood, or they've been carved into stone, or they celebrate. And there was like, even as a very small child, like flowers were just like, there was always that, it just sounds so simple, but there's always that, like, they give you like, okay, there's hope there. There's something, they really have no other purpose, I don't think. I mean, obviously, than their agricultural purpose of like pollinating, which is important, but to give us joy. And especially now in this day and age when everything is just so, you know, and everything is this, and everything is so chaotic, and technology and information and nonstop social media and dialogue, and it's just like, you know, we're killing ourselves with too much information, with too much information that's not even good information. It doesn't even mean anything, but we're constantly assaulted. Like you know, the human brain, I was reading some, or heard somebody on a podcast, it's like, you know, never in the history of time or the world has one person has had a person had nonstop information just spewing at them all day long. We were never meant to know all the problems of the world every single minute, every single place in the world. You know, so now we're just like, and it's, of course it's overwhelming. It's like, it causes problems. It just, and it makes, it's very easy to like fall into despair. And, you know, I'm somebody that that's not something I've always dealt with. I've always, from my early teen years, I've always dealt with depression. It's something that I've always had to which created this kind of like, I've always had this hunger for beauty, but it was sort of like, I need this thing that's gonna kind of take me out of myself and move me forward and inspire me. And that for me was flowers.
So when you talk about the two things, so when you talk about coping with depression, are you saying that flowers and working with flowers and being in the space is something that has helped you cope?
Oh, 100%. And even if it wasn't necessarily working with them, a lot of times it was just looking at them. And if it wasn't looking at them in person, it was looking at them in a beautiful book or a photograph or a painting, because it just would, it's like, you know, nothing in the world replaces inspiration. And if you have inspiration, it doesn't matter what's happening, you can slay dragons. And for me, you know, it was that inspiration, and it gave me that, and it still does. And like, even like I said, if I go a period of time where they're not a part of my life, it's like I rewind back to being a little kid, and like, you know, it's like that eagerness, and I realize that it's like the love and the need for that is just not lost.
Wonderful. And so was that part of so you've used words like joy, hope, and a coping mechanism for the depressive feelings that you had.
Yeah.
So were these parts some of the things that inspired you to gift the city of New York the flower arrangements in the way that you did?
Yeah, I think that
joy, hope.
100%, because I think for me, the key word, I've got a few new keywords that we need to start integrating, because, you know, but the key word was joy. Because, you know, joy is like, you can't buy joy. You don't even know if you can find, you can't, you know, it kind of happens when you least expect it. And it's that like little, I don't know what is it, but when you feel it, and it's usually a very quick feeling, you know that's what it is. And when you recognize it, and how rare and wonderful of a feeling it is, and, you know, over the years of just, you know, with life and dealing with everything from personal issues to business, you just start to, you know, it's very easy to let things get you down. And when you start to like, I would just start to kind of mentally like, you know, take notice of when I was feeling that. And there would be years where I was feeling like it was happening far and few between, you know. And, you know, actually the one way you know you can get joy is if you do something unexpected and nice for another person. Everybody knows across the board, you do something nice, whether it's, you know, giving somebody a $5 bill on the street, or opening up the door and smiling, or just anything, like you know what that feeling is. It's like such a great feeling. And in that like little feeling, you're like, that feeling, if we can make it a big feeling, then we can solve the world's problems. We can all get along. This is not, you know, it's like, there's so much energy in that little thing. So yeah, that's been my like, that's been the kind of the, you know, the 1 second here. I have a very cute puppy to show you. He's getting tripped up on the computer cord. Oh, now he's running around. Puppies and flowers. Okay, speaking of joy. So, yeah, I think that, you know, and I feel like in the flower flashes, they were started, you know, years before COVID. They were started in 2016, you know, but they were started at a kind of a time when we needed joy as well. And it was more of like, at that time, it was more of a response to the fact that, you know, like I said, we're just all kind of walking around with our phones and assaulted with everything. Like you turn on Instagram and feel like your life isn't good enough to, you read the news and you want to jump off a bridge. You know, it's just like nonstop dialogue that doesn't do anything to lift anybody up ever. So if you can have, and you know, flowers are the exact opposite of that. They're real. They're ephemeral. They're going to die in a few days. They're, you know, they're fragrant. They're beautiful. They open up. They have a lifespan. And then they're gone. So, you know, to bring that as an alternative to this, which ironically, it's this, which then was the medium to spread it, you know, so it's been an experiment. I mean, there's, you know, it's a very kind of, it's an uncalculated process. And in the process—
Sorry, it went up for a moment. So
yeah.
I didn't hear what you said before process.
I said it's been an experiment. You know, it's kind of an experiment starting these with no, well, honestly, why I was able to do it was because there was no expectations. Because it was not like, well, it wasn't like, okay, this is a marketing ploy or marketing technique. So we want, or this is like, I have a client that's paying, so I have to make sure they're happy. Or it was sort of like, you know, screw it, we'll do it. And it could just be the silliest thing ever. And who can, you know, and then if it doesn't bring any people joy, and you know, there's no point in it. Quickly, we learned that was not the case, but also, I mean, let's be honest. What I realized in the whole process is that I think the person, you know, I'm very happy to give people lift their spirits, but I'm a little selfish because I get a lot out of it. It's very fun.
That is the way of it.
I enjoy the dopamine rush. I enjoy the creative process of doing it very fast. I enjoy that it makes me. I enjoy the whole process of doing it kind of quickly and in the dark. I enjoy just, you know, doing it, getting there, doing it. And then if people love it, wonderful, you know, because that's.
What was the moment?
Yeah.
What was the moment when you thought, I'm going to do the very first one? What was the trigger? What, you know?
Well, the very first one. So it had been building up for a while, like a couple of years, like very kind of this abstract ideas. And, you know, this was in 2016, and for, you know, kind of rewinding, like I started my business in 2002, 2008, 2009, which is kind of ironic because that's when we had the financial crisis and we had a bad, you know, like there was no work. But my business after that just took off. It's sort of like, you know, it was like the whole world, or especially New York, recalibrated. Like that's when the restaurants all turned into comfort food. That's when, you know, this kind of overly processed, extravagant, pretentious design, nobody wanted anymore because it felt expensive and nobody had any money. Definitely, but I found that there was a whole niche of clients that still did have money, but they were very much concerned. You know, it became about perception. Okay. And I was like, well, great, because I've never liked that look anyway. And, you know, I like working with a dandelion as much as working an orchid. And, you know, ironically, you know, and ideally I'll put them together. You know, I like the juxtaposition, and creating something just feels like how I feel like we should live. And in my brain, the ideal way of how I want, you know, I think life should be. So it was good for business. And then, you know, so that was 2008, 2009, so 2010, like business really went great. You know, I've always been very under the radar. You know, my jobs were mostly, and I would say 90% word of mouth and repeat clients. And, you know, somebody would do something just kind of that way. And I'm very happy with that. I like that. Like staying out of the radar, under the radar is really my comfort zone. But, you know, with success comes a little boredom. And I would literally have these moments. Now, listen, this just sounds, this is a luxury problem, but it bothered me. I'd be like, you know, I was like approaching my 40th birthday, and I was like, is this what my life is now? Business is going well. I love what I'm doing, but it's just like, okay, now what am I going to do to entertain myself? You know, it's like, oh, what restaurant we're going to eat at, or like, what's the next vacation? Like, you know, I was single, and didn't have any intentions to have children. So I didn't have it was a very like decadent existence. And I didn't like it because it just felt like I was just trying to keep myself amused. Does that make sense?
So you were looking for the more. What was I doing?
It's sort of like, business is great. Clients are here. I love the jobs, but you know, we've hit a nice stride. Like, let's, you know, everybody's like, people are liking the look. We're not reinventing the wheel every single time. So there's a lost some of it's kind of creative challenge. Some of the like the stress and the excitement of having a business in Manhattan and starting out and just you're just celebrating when you pay the rent. Like, okay, well, you know, those kind of days are over a little bit. And now, you know, it would be like, now I'm not doing everything myself because I've got other people that will work on certain things. And so it's like, you know, there's got to be something else, you know, something more. Like I want something that kind of will, you know, it's time to give back in a way, but to give back in a way that is not, you know, that is kind of has a bigger meaning than just, you know, money or something. Mm-hmm. But also that feels very kind of like, you know, like authentic to my DNA and what it is I love. And also then, you know, like I said, so for every, you know, everything that I say that sounds so virtuous and lovely, there's always a flip side. There's always a selfish component to it. Let's be clear, because, you know, and the selfish component was I'm creative, but I'm feeling a little bored. How can I push myself further? So it's like, okay, how can we give back? How can I push myself creatively to think out of a box? You know, and so that's kind of how it started. So I'd had, you know, years prior, I had some, you know, you'd have these experiences where like, you know, you were doing a breakdown of, you know, all the flowers that come after an event. There's just so many flowers left, and we're cleaning the studio and we're taking all the bags of garbage out, and like they'll break down and suddenly you'll have all these like beautiful flower heads like that burst out of the ground. You'll see something like that, like so esoteric as that. I was like, wow, that's kind of pretty. And I was like, wouldn't it be fun like if we had alleys or something to just take like white flowers and just pile them up in the corner and not even have an arrangement, but just be something like, you know, so that was kind of going on in my brain. Didn't really do anything about it at all. But then what I also tell people is that, and this was a very kind of a clarifying moment, is that I was coming home from the office one afternoon, and it was like a Friday afternoon, and we didn't have any jobs that weekend. So we're clearing out the flower cooler, and I was taking a bunch of, you know, flowers that were on their last leg, but you know, that's when they look their best. And walking against, you know, I was coming from my studio in the East Village, walking to my apartment in the West Village, and I was going against kind of all the foot traffic, the midtown traffic that had gotten off the subway. And they were all, you know, young professionals getting out of their midtown office jobs. And it would just be like, they would see these flowers and it was just like, you know, it was like drool, like crazy. And it was funny. And then it's like, you know, you go on a subway with a bunch of those and people are like, you're like, wow, you know, this is really, people like react to this. There's something here. So so I'd had these ideas, but like, you know, business is busy and there's just not a lot of time to do this kind of stuff. So this is when I had met Irini, and I had met Irini many years prior when she worked at Vogue, and my partner at the time was also there. And Irini actually wrote, because she was a writer at Vogue. We became friends, the three of because she worked with my ex, and she ended up writing a lot of the press releases and the stuff just to get my business off the ground from the very beginning. time went on. She, you know, my partner and I, we went our separate ways. Irene got married, like life, you know, we hadn't seen each other for years. And it was fashion week and I walked into a restaurant and it was part of the long table. And she was sitting there. It's like, oh my God, we haven't seen each other for years. I'm like, Irene, speaking of, I just got a book deal, but you're my writer. Like you can do my voice kind of thing. Like I need you to help me on this project. So she came in on that. And then it was like, I started talking about kind of the things that I just told you, sort of like, you know, this need to like do something bigger, getting a little bored, everything's starting to look the same on Instagram, or the jobs are, they're all good. They're all pretty, but I'm like, well, what's next kind of thing. And so, you know, I brought her on to really kind of I said, I need somebody to kind of hold me accountable and be a little bit of the piston that keeps this engine running. Because my staff, I can't ask them to like, oh, stop what you're doing, you know, making the business money to go like take pictures of construction sites or like come in at 4 o'clock in the morning to do this, you know, just because this harebrained idea. Irene instantly, you know, she got it. She knew what I was trying to communicate and trying to say. And so I brought her on, and then the first one we had done this, we had done a like one of those like flower walls kind of thing. Everybody does them, but this was a midweek event for a TV show. So it was like on a Wednesday night or something. The next day, all these flowers came in clear garbage bags, and they were all just, you know, they had no stems. They were just the flower heads because they had been in the flower wall. And it was just these bright day glow dahlias and carnations and oranges and yellows and magentas. And they look so pretty in these clear bags. We're like, well, this is what we've been talking about. You know, like already they're being dragged in as garbage. Like that was way before I started putting flowers in a bin. That was another kind of layer down the road. But we're like, well, now is the time to do it. Let's do something. So Irene, she's like great with her phone. She shouts everything. She's an iPhone full of thousands of images of trash cans and fire hydrants and graffiti walls. And we started taking apart all the flowers and putting them in boxes. And we're like, we got up the next morning, we went to the Imagine Medallion in Central Park. And we're like, well, let's just try it. You know, let's just very, very simple. Like, I don't want it to be tricky because the idea is it's not overly designed. It just needs to be very strong and visually strong. Just this like halo of flowers, and discuss like, oh, should it have other flowers leading up to it? I'm like, no, just bold. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that was the first one. I hopped on my bike, rode downtown, and it had kind of went crazy on Instagram. I mean, back then we had like 25 followers. So like, you know, we got like 25 likes, which was a big day. And it was a lot of fun, you know? So it was fun. It felt good. It made people happy. I'm like, well, we can't, sorry about the puppy. You know, it's like, so we kept doing them. And, you know, then they turned into like the waste bins, and it became, you know, it became a thing. And they took on a whole different meaning after COVID. So yes, when COVID happened, it was like, well, now, you know, it was very necessary because we were all kind of living our stressed, but, you know, pretty comfortable lives. And this was an antidote to having, you know, having too many, not getting enough likes on Facebook, or having too many, whatever our problems were at the time as a society wasn't much. And then COVID hit. And then real problems started happening or coming to the surface. And it really had so much more of a meaning. And then, you know, the first one we did during COVID was, it was cherry branch season. So usually in Manhattan and in New York and Brooklyn, you know, during cherry branch seasons, you know, they have these farms in New Jersey and upstate New York where I want to see one of these places sometimes because I can't imagine how maligned these trees must look. But it's just like they bring in bales and bales of blooming cherry branches that are each stalk is 8 feet tall, and every restaurant, every party, every wedding has just gorgeous cherry branches, you know, everywhere. And this season there were like none of it. There was no restaurants were open, nobody was having parties. Like we missed the whole season. So I thought, you know, it would be fun. Let me talk to the growers and let's just do the very simple ones. Let's just get some bales of cherry branches, and we're going to go to 4 or 5 hospitals and just plop them in.
That was actually my next question. I mean, Oh, there's the answer to why the hospitals, but yes, why the hospitals?
So the hospitals, because, you know, that's the only place where, first of all, the city was empty. I was upstate. I have a house in the Hudson Valley, about 90 miles north. So I was coming in once in a while, but not really, because nobody was going anywhere. And it was so remarkable. The one time I did come, first time I came in, it was just like, the city is so empty. Like, you can go from one end of the island to the next in 10 minutes. And, you know, and it was sort of like, well, first of all, we don't want people to congregate. That's very, you know, it's like we're supposed, if we're going to do these, it can't be an attraction where people are coming out, because that's kind of like the opposite of what should be happening. But it was also, you know, the hospitals, like, everybody, every 7 o'clock every evening, people were, you know, everybody was leaning out of their apartments, hanging, you know, pots and pans, and like, it was these healthcare providers and workers that were, you know, coming in and doing the brave deeds. So it was like, well, this is, first of all, we all need this, but they need this, because they're going to be walking past this. So that was fun. We did I think we did 4 of them that night, and you know, it was quick, and do one, 15 minutes later, go to the next one. So within a matter of an hour and a half, I think we had like done 4 different hospitals. Plus, it took no time to get around because there was no traffic. And then that really just, they started, then the comments started coming in. Then the emails to our general information email box, the handwritten letters. And it was like, wow, okay. This is really, now we knew people liked them, because there's always a lot of likes on Instagram or a lot of comments. Fine, that's great.
It took on a much deeper meaning. Much
deeper meaning. And I remember, it was probably, I don't know, it was early summer, maybe late spring. It was probably May or 1st of June. And every single day, you know, somebody from my office who would answer would get and look at the general inbox, was just forwarding me email after email. And then I would come into the office to gather the, you know, the old fashioned mail. And I was literally getting, you know, handwritten notes and drawings, and it became very clear. I remember having this kind of sobering moment where I realized that it kind of became, what was the word? It sort of went from like, okay, yeah, this is good to give back, the flower flashes, people like them, to sort of like, wow, these are actually giving people joy at a very bad time, and a little bit of optimism, sense of help. And it kind of became, I guess, an obligation. It went from being one thing to sort of becoming, you know, because I was like, well, when I'm tired of doing this, what's the next thing going to be? What's the next? And I'm like, well, and it's like, it was very sober. It's like, this isn't even about you. You know, it's like, who cares if you enjoy doing them? Because if people are actually receiving this much happiness from this, which they are, and look by their response, and like, who am I, if I have this ability by doing something that really is very simple, then who am I to deny somebody joy?
You have a gift, and you were sharing.
And now I have a responsibility. It's like, it was not only a gift, it's like, it's kind of an obligation, it's a responsibility, because I mean, I know the power of flowers, and sometimes it's easy to be glib about it and say this and that, and, you know, kind of have a quick sound bite. But like, it you know, sometimes when you're in the forest, you don't see the trees, to like take a bad cliche, but like when you're doing it and it's a part of your life and you read the comments, but you kind of like, it doesn't necessarily resonate because you're in it. Or when it's done, I'm on my bike, I'm off to the next one. I'm thinking about, well, what's happening? You know, what do I have to do now? What meetings do I have? Or what's the next one going to be? And then you go on an hour later and look at the answer. I'm like, oh, this makes people happy. Great. Wonderful. I mean, it feels, you know, you get that warm and glowy feeling, but it's like always like, you know, I like to keep doing things. And that made me stop really kind of for a moment and be like, okay, I think this definitely, like, it's not about me anymore. It's like, it's got to be, because it's literally, like, I think I became cognizant of the fact that it actually brought some joy, and like,
yes,
damn, like, you know, it's like, don't we all need it?
I wanted to ask about one in particular. the I think it was the Mount Sinai, the one where the I can just
the hot pink ones on the lamp.
A lamp.
Yeah.
No, the sign outside the emergency.
Right. Yes.
Emergency. Can you remember doing that?
Oh, I remember that very well. So that was a fun one because we did that one in collaboration with American Express. So American Express said, listen, because we started doing our flower flash boxes, and which is a great way to get flowers into people's, homes because everybody's stuck at home. And this one was nice because we raised a lot of money. 100% of the proceeds went to the healthcare workers. So it was like $60,000. It was 52, 54, 50, and it was like, that's in a time of COVID, like that feels really good. Yes. But it was funny because so obviously, Irini had some select locations and we always discuss them and, kind of, she'll print them out and I'll sketch and doodle on them or figure it out, or we'll kind of weigh the pros and cons. And this one seemed like a good one to do. And like I said, we don't get permits or seek permission. We just go up there and do it. And so we did what we do. We went up there and just did it. And the whole thing was finished and two security guards like saunter around the corner and they just, they're like on their walkie talkies and like, you can't have that there. I'm like, oh crap. And they pointed to a corner, they literally less than 15 feet away, just around the corner, but still on the sidewalk. Like it was 12 feet from where we were because of whatever zoning it was. Yes. They're like, you can move it there. Well, I mean, these things come together quickly, but they don't come apart quickly and go back together again quickly, otherwise it's a catastrophe. So we let them, they let us take our pictures. Then we took the whole thing down, but we ended up taking all of the flowers and came back to the studio here, cleaned them, put them in buckets, and then took them back up to the hospitals. And just as the nurses and doctors came in, just handed them out. So they all got to, it was not for nothing, and made a lot of people very happy that day. So, yeah.
And the heart, the one where the picture of you at nighttime wearing a mask and doing the heart.
So the hearts are kind of one of my new favorites. I like them because we do them a little bit. We do those in advance the night before. We create these gigantic frames out of chicken,
wire. Yeah.
Grapevine hearts. And then we, fill them up with flowers, and then it's pretty easy. Just drag it off the truck or the van and prop it up and strap it down and fluff it up. But it's fun because, the hearts were like, they're like, they kind of look like the heart emojis, which people use on their text messages all the time. And it's very graphic. It's very, and it's very bold, and it looks great with traffic or buildings behind it. So that heart, I'm trying to think of that one where I'm wearing the mask. That was probably, that was one of those mornings where we agreed to let a reporter come along and follow us. That was, I remember. So that was the 1st of June. So we ended up doing like 3 hearts and then a big I love New York.
Yes, I saw that.
New York. So it was like, that was kind of in celebration that we were just opening up into phase 2 or phase 3 or something. And it was, it was like felt like the beginning of summer, and everybody was feeling a little bit more optimistic. And so that was kind of a big celebration of, loving the city.
I mean, I've taken away quite a few words from this conversation, but I think optimism, joy, and hope, and, and realizing that this had become less about you and more about a responsibility to spread joy, optimism, and hope. And that is a message that I take away from this. Yeah. That there is always something that is bigger than you, that is outside of you. Mm. And that if you are alert and alive to that responsibility, then you're spreading joy, optimism, and hope.
Yeah, and the other, my 2 new words that I want to figure out how to fold those in the mix, because we all need joy, optimism, hope, but right now we also need grace and forgiveness. And I think that there is it's easy to love those who agree with you. It's not easy to love those who don't. And love and joy and hope, it's not a one-way street. So we gotta practice practice the words that we very easily speak.
So how do you learn that from flowers, these particular ones? How do you learn about forgiveness? What do flowers teach you about forgiveness?
I don't know. I'll get back to you on that. That's what those are what like that's what I'm trying to figure out. But I think it's, you know, it comes down to they're the ephemeral nature of flowers. Flowers are there for a very short amount of time. The flower flashes are there for a very short amount of time. We as people are only here for a very short amount of time.
I really love that analogy.
You know, the only best way to improve your life is to forgive or give somebody else grace. You're only benefiting yourself first and foremost. And our time, you know, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? You know, if anything that COVID's taught me as a business owner, you know, the responsibilities and the fears and the scariness of, you know, of like having seen jobs go away, or, you know, knowing that I've got employees that I want to, you know, I need to maintain and that are depending on, you know, me for their livelihood. I've never in my life been able to live one day at a time. I've spent a lot of money on therapy and read a lot of books, but never been able to do it. And the only way I've been able to get through this is that just keep it in increments of 24 hours. And then within that increment, you keep it in an increment of 12 hours and 1 hour, you know, it's like, because you just don't know. And honestly, like, does it, but the things that used to be so important, like, do they matter in the long run?
How much do they matter? And when you see the short span of life that the plants have, you put that side by side, how transient it is for human beings. And COVID taught us that. Here one day, gone tomorrow. So grace and forgiveness, a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus said, love your enemies. He didn't say love your friends. Of course, you're going to love your friends. You know, do good to those that persecute you. Of course, that's what's hard about it. It's not easy to do something to that if you're all aligned and, you know, you're all on the same page. Well, that's a given, of course. But what does any of that mean if you're not doing it to somebody who may violently disagree with you, or vice versa? Like, where it means absolutely nothing. So, you know, I think flowers are part of my life, and you know, they teach us stuff.
Yes.
If we look.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure to meet you. I had said to my daughter just today, I was saying to her, I like to watch the show, Say Yes to the Dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was saying to her,
that's just around the corner here. Like, it's like 2 blocks from here.
I was saying, when the time comes, 15 of us at least, her cousins and all, we you know, she was saying, Mom, it's so hard to get in those shows. I said, you know, we'll just tell them there's 15 of us coming from Nigeria.
Yeah,
and we're all dressed in our African garb, and they'll let us. So now we will.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
I'll have 15 assistants for a flower flash some morning.
Thank you so much thank you for the time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And it was
so much.
Really good to meet you. I said this to Irene, and I'm saying it to you, hand to heart. Thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Be well. Enjoy your rest of your day.
You too. Be well. Be well. Thank you. Bye.